Okay, so good morning, good morning. If you see this now or you see this at a later time, still have a good morning. We last week we studied Bereshis, the first parsha of the Torah, the Genesis. We studied creation. We got through about, I don't know, probably 15 verses of Genesis. This week we're going to, each week we read a different parsha. So this week the parsha we're going to read is Noach. So rather than finish Genesis, we'll just continue with the timetable here. So the end of Genesis the end of last week's parsha, God looked at the state of the world and he said, it's bad. It's bad. It's there's people are just it's only bad the whole day. And it says, and God, he actually regretted that he made the world. And he said, I'm going to destroy him. But there was this fellow Noach. First of all, I think we have to discuss, what does it mean God regretted? I mean, God is the all-knowing, right? The omnipotent God, omnipresent God, right? The past, the present, and the future. What does it mean that he regretted? What does it mean he was upset? He knew. So I think the best response I can give to that is that anybody that is has a child, right? If you think about it, when the child is born and you cradle the child and you're so happy and your tears roll down your cheeks, tears of joy, tears of happiness, and their first steps and their right, you know that your child is going to give you a run for your money. You know it. You don't know if it's going to be at 7 or it's going to hold off until 11 or it's really going to start at 13, 14. And then, the older they get in their teens, the worse it gets. And you're going to be locking horns. And you're going to be, you're going to be pulling your hair out. But nonetheless, you still held the baby with joy and you still had a blast of a time. And even though you knew there were going to be some very tough times. So God, he says, unfortunately, it came to this. Unfortunately, I knew that they would be this, but yeah, and now it's time for me to feel bad. I wasn't going to, cry tears of grief when they were first born, but now I will. So anyway, the Torah says about Noach is tzaddik. The Torah, this is the first verse, that Noach was a tzaddik. Tamim haya bedorata. He was great with his generation, perfect in his generation. And et olehim yisalach Noach, and he walked with God. So I think it's that verse is very important. There are people that amongst their family, they're tyrants with their spouse and their kids, the wife and the kids, the husband and the kids, whatever. They're just tyrants. They're not nice people. And everything is about image, and it's that's their life. Kids have to act proper, spouse has to act proper, and they have to be the best dressed in the nice house and the nicest car, and they're just not nice. However, when they also go to the social club and they go to the country club, and they're known as Mr. Nice or Miss Congeniality, and they're just perfect. On the flip side of the same coin, you have people who are extremely, extremely good with God. They're so pious. They daven, they pray 3 times a day. They study, and they encourage others to study, and they do outreach, and they put on tefillin and inspire others. But between them and the lamppost in their own home, they're not what they seem. They're not as spiritual as what they say. So they could, in between them and their own home, they could possibly, not keep kosher. Outwardly, of course, I'll only eat kosher, but inwardly, they wouldn't keep kosher. Or they just attended a lecture on morality, and they asked good questions, and the leader, the rabbi, whatever, was very impressed by their moral compass, and then they go home and watch porn. The Torah is telling us that Noach, he was righteous. Why was he righteous? Because Tamim haya b'dorotav. He was genuine with people, others, not only his family, or not exclusionary with his family. He was just an all-around good person, and he was genuine with God as well. So he didn't have a double life. He or she is not a charlatan, an actor, where with good people they act good, with bad people they act bad. They aim to please constantly, consistently. And we all do it to an extent. I catch myself doing it. But Noach was he had a backbone, and he also had his morals and his values were set in concrete. So it doesn't matter which environment he was in, he was a tzaddik. He was righteous. That's what caught God's eye, is that he was consistent. And by the way, consistency is probably the most important ingredient in anybody's life. Consistency. When you're at the workplace and you tell your boss that, I'm sorry, I don't work on Shabbat. I don't work on Shabbat. And the boss says, well, what does that mean? He says, well, I have to leave at 5 o'clock in the summer, and I have to leave at 2 o'clock in the winter. The boss says, 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock? He says, I have to. Right? And the boss says, okay, that's the law, right? And that's, I respect you. If that's your religion, that's what I'm going to do. Boss, don't worry, I'll make it up. No, don't. It's whether you make it up or not, it's irrelevant. Yeah, you can leave at 2 because that's your Jewish practice. Then the boss hears that from Friday at 2 through Saturday night at 6, you have a second job. You're working. You're a security guard at Macy's. And that is not going to bode well. It's not going to fare well. Chances are you'll get fired. But duplicity, for bad behavior. If the boss knows that, yes, this is what you do. So you go home and you have Shabbat. And you celebrate Shabbat. And you with your family and your synagogue, and you invite your boss to your synagogue, and and you're an upstanding member, etc. Then the boss can respect, because it's consistent with what you claim. However, if it's not consistent with what you claim, then you're no tzaddik. Noach was a tzaddik. He was consistent. There's a reason why the God requests of us to say the Shema twice a day. Offer up the sacrifices, right? Twice a day. It's because of something called consistency. You're consistent by day as you are by night. That's why we say the Shema twice. Once in the day and once at night. Day means your mundane activities. Night means your family, which is not mundane. And it means your time for God, which is not mundane. Day also means the good times. And night can mean the bad times. Either way, you connect with God. Right? Either way, you say the Shema. That's consistency. So Noach, that's what he had going for him, is that he was a consistent person. The Torah tells us that Noach had 3 kids, and all his 3 kids got married. Noach lived to 950 years. So he's, we all worry, when will our kids get married? When will our kids get married, right? Noach, okay, so his kids got married at 300. That's fine. That's fine. You can get married at 300 if you want. Live your life. 300 years to get married. With us, the biological clock is ticking, and you can't wait to 300. So he had 3 kids and three daughters-in-law. He was married himself to Mrs. Noach, also known as Nama. And the Torah tells us that God said, I'm destroying it now. But Timale haaretz Hamas. The world was filled with Hamas. What is Hamas? Hamas is just, what is Hamas today? What do we know about Hamas? Hamas doesn't discriminate between soldiers and civilians. They're equal opportunity offenders. And that's what happened in the times of Noach, right? The people stole from other people. They didn't care if you're rich or poor. They grabbed women. They didn't care if they were taken, not taken, married, not married, spoken for, not spoken for. And they were completely morally corrupt. And God said to Noach, the end is near. I'm done. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to build an ark. And God gave specific commands. It has to have 3 floors. Upper floors for humans, middle floors for animals, lower floors for refuse. And waste. Human waste, animal waste. And I want you to build it this certain way. It has to be made out of wood. It has to have pitch on the outside, tar on the outside, and pitch on the inside, and these are the size you have to make it. You have to make it with a skylight. The skylight has to be translucent, which is not, it's not opaque and it's not transparent. The skylight has to have the ability to open, etc., etc., etc. And the detail, God gave it to the inch about how it has to be made. And God said, when it's done, I'm going to bring up flood. And God said to Noach, you should build the ark. The rugged Shabbat, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, he says that when God told Noach he had to build the ark, the commandment was to Noach alone. Once the Torah was given, we have this concept called proxy. That somebody can make kiddush and include other people. A person can make the hamotzi and include other people. A person can blow the shofar and include other people. A person could lead the services for other people. But prior to that, when you got the commandment was yours. So Noah had to make the ark himself. He couldn't hire people. He couldn't even ask his sons to help. And he had to make it himself. The benefit of him making it himself is it took him a very long time. The benefit taking a long time, he had the opportunity, multiple years, in order to tell the people what they're doing is wrong. They say Noach didn't do that. When people ask Noach, what are you doing? He said, I'm building an ark. He goes, you know what? He goes, yeah, there's going to be a flood because God is not happy because the people are immoral. And they looked at him and they said, you're delusional. He goes, no. God is gonna kill mankind. He's gonna inundate the earth with water. And they said, you're delusional. Noach wasn't forceful. Noach didn't sell the ark as a cause to repent. Noach just was factual. But it took him many, many years. So there was hope. For each day there was hope that the people would repent. And after many, many years, remember he had to log his own wood, cut his own wood, right? He had to stay in it, and he had to glue it, and he had to whatever they did back then. He had to make wood going this way, he had to lateral wood and to strengthen the wood, etc., etc., etc. And I always joke that nowadays, if Noach would ask to, God asked Noach to make an ark, so Noach would have to go to the town of Huntington to get a permit. He wouldn't get the permit because the town of Huntington would say that he needs to clear it with the county health. County health would want to know where the sewage is. County health would want to know, is it, is it, how big is it, and do you have, do you need a variance, And they'd also want to know if is it you'd have to get a permit from the Department of Environmental Conservation in order to get it. They would discuss the trees that he's cutting down, and will it affect the spotted owl, and he can only work from 9 to 5. He's not allowed to work on Sundays, and there's blue laws, etc. It has to be union. For him just to work alone is not going to fly, and anyway, he would never be able to make the ark these days. So that's the, back then, there was less bureaucracy, so he was able to make it. And God told him that this is what's going to happen. There's going to be animals come up, creatures, the bugs, the mosquitoes, the ticks, the lions and tigers, oh my. And the Torah tells us that Noach did everything that God created, and it was complete. The Torah tells us that each animal came to Noach. Noach didn't have to go deep into the forest to find the yellow spotted beetle or the spotted or unspotted owl. It came to him. All Noach had to do was direct them to their cubicle where they're going to be. So this is the bug section, the butterfly and the beetle. This is the mosquito section. This is the slithering snake section. This is the poisonous frog. This is the toad, etc., etc. And they came to him. And they came to him. And as soon as they came to him, Noach and his family, there was Noach, Mrs. Noach, 3 children, and their spouses, and they were outside of the ark. All the animals were in, and it started to rain. The Torah tells us that Noach entered the ark because of the flood. Even Noach wasn't convinced. Even Noach wasn't convinced it was going to happen. So he didn't go in and lock the door. And then the plane takes it to the plane goes through the tarmac until it gets to the runway. I forget the term they use, but Noach waited to the last minute. The ark was already beginning to sway from side to side. It was beginning to float, and Noach went up the ramp. And God picked up the ramp and shut it. So Noach waited to the last minute because he wasn't convinced it was going to happen. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And just like God said, and the ark was lifted. God told Noach to also take food for every animal. Take human food, animal food. Certain animals could eat human food. But he had to make sure that every animal was fed. Now, that was a laborious task, because the time you finished feeding the animals and you were completely exhausted, it was time for the next feeding. So there's very, very little downtime. The Midrash tells us that Noach was actually scratched, bitten, and abused by the animals. And it was very, very hard going, but he had to save mankind, and he had to save the animal life. So you see here, by the way, that when we hear about this species going extinct, or this species is extinct, and the Siberian tiger, if we're not careful, there's only certain 100 left, etc., whatever it is. God was careful. God didn't want extinction. We should not have the audacity to allow animals to become extinct. If they were created for a reason. And either because we overlog, overfish, we whatever it is that causes these animals to become extinct, it's not okay. It's not godly behavior. We have to be careful No, God gave that to mankind. He gave it to Noach. Make sure that these animals did not become extinct. That command did not go away once Noah died, once the flood was over. Some animals were naturally became extinct, and that was God's choice. So God, and we can look at it this way. God could have destroyed the world by many means. It could have been an asteroid, it could have been a fire, it could have been a volcano, it could have been an earthquake, it could have been killer bees. It could have been Alfred Hitchcock's movie, The Birds. So many different ways. God chose the flood. And the reason why he chose the flood, and the reason why it was 40 days and 40 nights, is because God chose purity. He chose something called a mikveh. A mikveh is we go to the mikveh when we need to become pure. A woman menstruates and loses an egg. That's a loss of life. After the period is over, she goes to the mikveh. After a convert wants to convert, so they do everything, and then they go to mikveh, and they have a new life. A man has to go to the mikveh after they got leprosy, and a woman for that matter. Leprosy, they were quarantined. They did the wrong thing. They had to step away from society. And now it's a new beginning. And that's what mikveh symbolizes. Mikveh symbolizes a new beginning for everyone. And that's what the flood was. The flood was the biggest mikveh of all times. It was where God purified the world. Purified the world. And certain species could not be purified. And they explain it as such. Animals do not kill arbitrarily. They don't go around killing. Animals kill when they need to eat. Animals kill when they're frightened for their lives or for their pride's life. Right? They're cubs. That's when animals attack. Right? If you think about the geese, you can walk by them, no problem. If you walk too close to their little, geeslings, you hear the hiss because they're nervous. And that now, these human beings that were destroyed, they killed arbitrarily, and God said, "I'm not allowing that." Killing arbitrarily, and they killed animals and they killed fellow humans. God said, "No, it's not okay. It's not okay. You kill for sport is not okay. You kill to hunt to eat is okay. You kill because you can, it's not okay. You kill a human, it's not okay." So God said, I'm done. Noah, you get it. So therefore I'm going to save you and your progeny because you get it. You get it. Noah, by the way, was a vegetarian. Noah's family were vegetarians. They lived on mulberry wine and pistachios and edamames, right? So Noah understood that I'm not going to kill. I'll eat. I'll exist. I'll exist in something else, and I'm definitely not going to kill a human. So God said, because they killed indiscriminately, I'm not going to allow them to exist. The same is true with animals. The animals that killed indiscriminately, God did not allow to exist. The one that comes to mind, this is different Jewish scientists and philosophers, is the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were brutal. The dinosaurs were completely out of control. God said, I'm not going to continue letting them to live. And likewise, any other thing that was that did not, that killed for sport or killed because they could, God did not allow them to live. So if we find bones, fossils from years ago, millions of years ago. So this is Dr. Gerald Schroeder in his book. He says that these, yeah, they did exist. Dinosaurs did exist, but the flood killed them. And the fact that they're fossilized, they were also under tremendous pressure from water for over a year, or for a year and 10 days, in fact. So he says, so it changed the makeup of the bones. I don't know if that's makes scientific sense. I'm not a scientist. I don't know, but that's his position. But the idea is alive and well. For sure, the idea is alive and well. That certain animals didn't make it to the ark. There's a great cartoon out there where you see there's two dinosaurs, and they're sitting on a rock, and the rock is 2 feet above the water, and there's water as far as the eye can see. And one dinosaur turns to the other and goes and looks at the other and said, "You said it was today." And he goes, "I thought it was today. It was yesterday." And far off in the distance, you can see the ark where it's too late. They were too late. They got the day wrong, right? We all know those type of people who come late to everything and anything. So these dinosaurs. Anyway, it rained and it poured. It poured for 40 days it was like Seattle, Washington, or London, England. It just, without stop, it just rained and rained and rained. And it was a heavy rain. And it was not only, now, raining for 40 days and 40 nights, yes, creates havoc. We saw this from, Hurricane Henry, right? Henry, right? It was just created havoc. But it was more than just rain coming down. The Torah tells us that nifku kol mayonis, right? Tahim Rabbah. The Torah tells us that the earth, basically, it just broke apart, and natural waters that were deep below the earth burst forth. The windows of the heaven opened. The fountains of the great deep burst forth. It was coming at us there were geysers all over the place, not just in Yellowstone. And they tell us that they were hot. You think of hot springs, you think of geysers, right? Being incredibly hot. They were hot. So not only did it drown, but it boiled. And it killed mankind. And it killed everything, not only mankind. And every animal in the ark was placed leminah. It was placed to its kind. Lions and the lioness was separated from the tiger and the tigress, which was separated from the lamb and lambess. It wasn't because of danger of being consumed, but rather it was because that was part of the problem. Animals, and humans were doing what they wanted. And that was another issue, right? That was another issue. Fish, yeah, fish were okay. Fish, they say that they say that's why Shabbat we have to eat fish, is because to recognize that the fish was saved from the flood. The fish did not pervert their path, but some of the animals did. And by the way, there was no violence in the ark. In other words, the wolf did not attack the lamb. It was in the ark. It was wartime. They realized that their existence was at stake, and they did not attack. And the waters, they got mightier. They got stronger, and they got higher, and God destroyed every single thing. after 40 days and 40 nights, the rain stopped. And Noach and the ark continued to float for another 150 days because there was no place for it to dock. There's no place. There was no solid place. There's no terra firma. There was nothing. After 150 days, a very tall mountain came into view, Mount Ararat, which some say is in Turkey, some say is in Saudi Arabia. And it came to rest. The ark came to rest on top of the mountain. It still was inhabitable for another 160 days. It was still inhabitable. They could not get out of the ark. It was like the Everglades, right? It was water and earth combined. It was swampy. It was muddy, and they couldn't leave the ark. So the ark, so they were there for 110 days. I mean, we've heard of round the world cruises, and it must be extremely, extremely opulent and incredible. But they could restock the food round the world cruises, right? They get their sewage, self-contained sewage is cleaned, new food, fresh fish are brought on board. With Noach, it was they just it was that turmeric spice that they put on everything, and and garlic that went in every meal, and without any docking. So there's a difference, and eventually, more and more of the world could be seen, but there was no life. They couldn't see any trees. They couldn't see any grass. They couldn't see anything. And finally, it came to rest and they saw earth. And Noah said, "Okay, let me try." So he sent out a bird, a raven. The raven went out. The raven came back. Nothing. He sent a dove. Came back nothing. He sent a dove again, and it came back with a leaf, a little twig from an olive tree. And that was the sign to open the ark. Now, if you look carefully, it says God, Vayiskar Hashem ba'ado, God closed the ark, and it says Noach opened the ark. So from it, which is fascinating. So it could have said God closed the ark and God opened the ark door, right? It doesn't say that. It says that God closed the ark and Noach opened the ark door. Basically, there was a cosmic shift. There was a change in God's attitude. God closed it, and God said, "I'm not going to open it. I'm not going to open it." Until now, I try to protect them. I try as much as I could, mankind. And they perverted their way. Okay, Noah didn't. But God said, I've changed. Mm-hmm. I've changed. I'm not going to, they're gonna have to fend for themselves somewhat more than they did, even more than in Adam's times. They're gonna have to open their own darn door. Right? And by the way, and we see this all the time. We see this all the time with human beings, right? If you think about it. Somebody hurts us, right? Somebody hurts, a partner hurts us. So after the hurt, you decide whether you're going to dissolve the partnership or not. So if you decide to dissolve the partnership, you dissolve the partnership and you don't become a partner again. Why? Because things changed. The relationship changed. Let's say you do decide not to dissolve the partnership and the partnership is still as it was. Well, guess what? It's not as it was. Things change. So from now, instead of one signature on the checks, you're going to need two signatures on the checks because you got hurt, you got burnt the first time, right? And Judaism, by the way, does not teach turn the other cheek. Ignore what happened. Forge ahead. No. Judaism says do not turn the other cheek. Be wary. Be wary, I mean. Be suspicious. Somebody hurt you. You got to watch your back. Hurt me once, shame on you. Hurt me twice, shame on me. That's Judaism's attitude. So God said, yeah, the relationship has changed. It has changed. I'm not going to tolerate bad behavior. You murder somebody now, I'm not going to look away. Right? You're vicious, animal or beast. I'm not going to turn away. And so there was a cosmic shift, pre-flood to post-flood. Right? So pre-flood, it seems like there was no punishment. They could do what they wanted. There was no punishment. Post-flood, every single infraction you're held accountable for. It may not happen right away because that would negate free will. But you're accountable for every single action, positive or negative. Pre-flood, it's God let you get away with nonsense and further nonsense, and it got worse and worse and worse. And there was just this slippery slope into a moral abyss. God said no more. Now it's fascinating, and I'm going to end in a minute because of this. I have to be at the cemetery. It's fascinating that we seem to be sliding into this moral abyss now. There are so many things changing rapidly in the world, in our country, that's not morally correct. Without getting into political stuff, I'm not political. I'm just talking morally. And there's more news, today coming out of California, which seems to be, morally corrupt. When's it going to stop? When's the flood going to come? You have to ask yourself. And I firmly believe that a house of worship is an oasis amongst the madness, because we accept, we embrace, but we stand solid. We don't enforce the shenanigans that is out there. Enough said. God bless. Please feel free to share, and we'll see you again.